Once again, we're the safest big city in America. The era of mass incarceration did not begin in New York City, but it will end in New York City. And we are getting closer every single day to that great day when we will close Rikers Island for good. The New York City Housing Authority has a plan to bring brand new everything to 175,000 NYCHA residents. From new roofs to new kitchens and bathrooms, we've more than doubled the number of certified minority and women-owned businesses and awarded them more than $10 billion in city contracts.
Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jenna Flanagan. Mayor de Blasio delivering his 6th State of the City address Thursday morning to a crowd at the Symphony Space on the Upper West Side. After making some bold moves regarding health care for all New Yorkers and paid time off for workers this week, the mayor made his case for New York to be a bellwether progressive city. But was the mayor really addressing us, or was his message intended for a national audience, with a look towards a potential 2020 run for the White House? And along with his accomplishments, how big are the challenges he faces ahead? Joining me now to discuss is the executive editor of the Gotham Gazette, Ben Max. Ben, it's always good to have you back on Metro Focus.
My pleasure.
So what was it that stuck out to you? I mean, a lot of people heard this speech and they thought, are you still talking to us or to the country?
After what has been a somewhat sleepy last year and a half, 2 years even, and that has also included a lot of controversy over things around NYCHA, for example, the mayor sort of seems to have woken up a little bit here early in 2019 and put a lot of new proposals on the table. This speech certainly fit into these themes of fighting inequality and making the city the fairest big city in the country that he talks about, although that's a little bit hard to gauge sometimes. But it was certainly sort of a return to where he started, and something interesting after a couple years where he really hasn't put a lot new on the table. There's certainly some new proposals here. And
we definitely, as I mentioned in the intro, we saw some things start to roll out earlier. But what was it that stuck out to you of the proposals that he was putting forward for the city?
So as you said, he reiterated this call to really try to expand health care coverage to every New Yorker who doesn't have it and encourage people to use the city hospitals more and the city health insurance program, Metro Plus, and also this planned push to mandate paid vacation days, which has been a bill that's been sitting around in the city council for a few years, and he's decided now to back it. Other than that, he talked about more protections for workers, especially freelancers. He talked about more tenant protections to try to prevent evictions even more.
I was going to say, we saw him sign that bill.
Yes, exactly. An executive order to create a new office within the mayor's office. And then he talked about expansion of 3K, ferries, and I think very important, new measures to increase bus speeds. And this is one of the things that affects so many people's daily lives that the mayor has really not done enough on, clearly, over his tenure. And he seems to be taking an increased interest in the buses. Those are a few of the highlights, but he really did go through a lot of topics.
He absolutely did. And what I thought was interesting was towards the end of the speech, he focused a lot on the topics he'll be taking north to Albany.
Yes, he definitely outlined pieces of his Albany agenda. And we know that every year at the beginning of the year, the mayor goes and testifies before the legislature and outlines sort of what he wants to see from Albany in their session, especially with an eye on the budget. So he'll be doing that. But he gave us a preview. One of the key things that he talked about was wanting the right regulatory system for legalizing recreational marijuana, and that's going to be a state decision, but he has some things that he thinks need to be part of that. But also voting reform, campaign finance reform, certainly criminal justice reform, some of the things that the mayor's talked about for a long time and a lot of Democrats have talked about, and now with a newly fully Democratic control in Albany, there's a lot more chance of passage. I do want to quickly go back to sort of how you frame things here, which is about the mayor's focus. I think he's very happy to be talking about a progressive city that's sort of an example across the country. But I highly doubt that the mayor is going to throw his hat in the ring in the presidential race. We shall see what the next year holds. But really, people are making those decisions now. We already saw Elizabeth Warren jump in. Other people will be doing that. And I don't really see the mayor doing that, though he certainly likes to try to be a trendsetter, And this goal of making it the fairest big city in the country is certainly something he's already said he plans to go around the country talking about.
I was going to say he's clearly elevating his platform. But speaking of the mayor being in Albany, of course, there's the big three letters that everybody wants Albany to fix, the MTA. He did talk about a lot of proposals that were on the table for that.
So very important that he's doing more of what he can control around the buses, because the mayor does control the city streets, and that's part of, the MTA has to work with the MTA on the buses. But he really stressed that he wants to see a plan for MTA funding in the state budget by April 1st. Now, he can do more to influence this, but he certainly sounded much warmer to congestion pricing, even as he said he still favors an increased tax on higher earners to help fund the MTA, but it's going to have to be a combination of things. So we'll see where state lawmakers land on that.
Well, of course, the devil is always in the details, and those details are always in the budget. He did make it a point to tell everyone to circle April 1st on their calendar, because that's when the state budget is due. Is there any indication as to what we can expect, hopefully, from a democratically controlled state legislature and a Democratic governor who might not have had the best interest or the biggest interest in the mayor's speech today?
Right. Governor Cuomo didn't seem to be listening in. He went on and did a radio appearance while the mayor was speaking, which gave a little undercut to the mayor's, the attention the mayor was getting. But that won't really affect the legislative process, I don't think, too much. So I think we are going to see clearly things related to voting and campaign finance reform move pretty quickly. We're going to see some new gun control, reproductive health rights expanded in the state. When it comes to, issues that are really of importance to the city, I think some of the criminal justice reform will be really interesting to see. There's going to be some battles over education funding. Those are a couple of the marquee things to watch. The MTA is obviously certainly at the top of the list, as you indicated. I also want to add, I think it was interesting some of the things that the mayor didn't get to. He made a very brief mention of Amazon coming to the city. You would think if this is something the mayor was really excited about, having landed this deal to bring an Amazon campus to Queens, that he would have highlighted it a bit more in the speech. Now, he did make a brief mention, but a little strange that he wouldn't hit that home a bit more as he talked about opportunity for people and, creating a city where it's easier to live. Well, job opportunities at Amazon are supposed to be part of that picture, and he only briefly mentioned it. Same thing with NYCHA, a very brief mention, but he didn't really go into the details of a plan that he rolled out in December for the next phase of NYCHA, something he doesn't seem to want to talk about too much.
Well, we only have a few seconds left, but can we expect the city council to be on board with this new agenda?
I think it's a great question, and I think we need to see what the reaction really is from the city council speaker, Corey Johnson, and some other council members. There's certainly a few things the mayor outlined that have been city council priorities, tenant protection stuff, a retirement savings plan for workers who don't have one. We need to see where that goes exactly. And the paid vacation days, as I said, was a city council bill that's been around for a while. So there's pieces in there. We'll see where the conflict comes.
All right, well, Ben, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and we will definitely be following to see where this great plan that was laid out before us, what actually happens in reality. Thank you.